If you're a maintenance supervisor for a commercial property, you've had to deal with everything from leaky faucets to flickering light bulbs. But nothing's worse than that ancient boiler that's lived in the building since the day it was built, 50 years ago. It's enough to make anyone lose their cool. That's where Grainger comes in. With industrial-grade products and dependable fast delivery, Grainger can help with any challenge, from worn-out components to everyday necessities. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Finding someone that understands you is hard because you're human, and there's a lot of different humans out there. eHarmony helps you find someone you can be yourself with. You think no one would understand mourning a plant like it's a loved one, or singing made-up songs to your dog, but that's the type of person eHarmony helps you find. Someone who makes you feel seen, heard, and understood. Get started today on eHarmony. Get who gets you.
We need sunlight to be healthy, but it also damages our cells and makes us look older faster. And now our attempts to not get cancer are killing coral reefs. Sunscreen also alters the vital functioning of our hormones. So what's a girl to do? You're listening to the Health Courage Collective podcast, episode 154, Sunscreen, originally published May 25th, 2022. Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Hello, my friend, and welcome to another episode. I hope you're having a fantastic summer day today. How is your PM 2.5 exposure? Did you at least get on the Air Now website to check the air quality in your area today? The AQI, Air Quality Index, by me on the day I'm writing this is 54, so it's above the threshold of being safe to exercise outside. My little indoor monitor's still saying AQI is 5 to 9, so I think I'm safe indoors today. Today we're going to talk about something else that we're all exposed to a certain extent every day, but is a lot less straightforward about what in the world to do about it, because sun exposure is healthy for us, and it can also literally kill us. I know that, like many things, a lot of people have a lot of different opinions about sunscreen. We know sun damage accelerates the aging of our skin, and that the total number of sunburns you get before you're 18 increases your risk of getting skin cancer as an adult. We also know that sun on our skin produces vitamin D, which is vitally important, and that exposure to sunlight improves our mood and even our sleep, as it supports our circadian rhythms. So, what's the deal with our skin's relationship to this fireball in the sky? Does anyone really know? I think anti-sunscreen people make some good points. We didn't involve indoors or wearing SPF 50 sunscreen. Rates of melanoma have tripled since the 1970s, despite all the sunscreen being slathered on since then. An article in the Journal of the National Cancer Institute in the early 2000s showed that people exposed to daily sun have a lower risk of developing melanoma and a higher rate of survival if they do. Sun exposure helps prevent future burning, sort of an anti-fragility hormetic stress program for your skin. In 2004, Dr. Michael Hollick was fired from his job in the Department of Dermatology at Boston University School of Medicine for advising that people get 5 to 10 minutes of direct sunshine 2 to 3 times a week. Well, that's a fine treatment for someone who helped pioneer vitamin D identification and research back in the 1970s. So crazy. Dave Asprey calls light a nutrient and says it should be part of your wellness routine. The right light at the right doses at the right times of day is important. It benefits your skin, your energy, your immunity, your brain function, and your sleep. Dave talks a lot about what he calls junk light, like junk food but for light. And we're exposed to it a lot. Our bodies get instructions at a cellular level from natural light, but junk light can mess us up. In our eyes, but even on our skin. I remember hearing some kind of study once about sleeping in darkness, and sleep was disturbed if there was light on the skin that wasn't even near the subject's face at all. Like, even your leg knows that it's not dark enough for you to get deep sleep. Weird stuff. Light therapy is a real thing and super interesting. It can alter your mood, treat depression, and change your skin. Melatonin, the protein that gives your skin a tan and is also in your eyes, can actually convert water from your cells into oxygen and free electrons that can be used by your mitochondria. To make melanin, you need both sun exposure and enough polyphenols in your diet. Polyphenols are one of the good things in plants, especially colorful plant foods. They're what put the super in superfoods. Think berries, cocoa powder, currants, cherries, spinach, wine, and spices. Deeply pigmented plant foods have a lot of polyphenols. Spending time in morning sunlight specifically helps improve your sleep-wake cycle and increases testosterone production. It also boosts ovulation in women by stimulating the pituitary gland. Natural sunlight can also help boost our old friend nitric oxide. You can go back and listen to episode 9 if you want to know about how awesome nitric oxide is for you. You want nitric oxide in your body. Sunlight boosts serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine like an antidepressant. This is why light therapy can be as or more effective than antidepressants for seasonal affective disorder. So, sunlight is good. We instinctively know that the guy who never comes out of the basement isn't as healthy or appealing as the one who does, right? But we also know outdoorsy people whose face looks like an old catcher's mitt. Right? You know what I'm talking about. The sun does accelerate aging. Even worse, it's not a myth that sun exposure can lead to cancer. Basal cell carcinoma is the most common, but least problematic. Squamous cell carcinoma is the next most common and more serious than basal cell. Melanoma is the most serious and deadly. I've seen people in their 20s actively dying from melanoma when I was on my oncology rotation for pharmacy school, and it is horrible. So, don't turn your back on all sun protection. While sun exposure produces vitamin D in your skin, and vitamin D is superfood for your immune system, UV exposure can actually directly suppress your immune system. It's thought that UVA rays are the ones that suppress the immune system. If you remember, UVB rays have a shorter wavelength and are more associated with burning. UVB rays at 311 to 313 nanometers is what produces vitamin D in your skin. UVB rays are a little more associated with the non-melanoma skin cancers. UVA rays have a longer wavelength, penetrate more deeply into your skin, and are more associated with skin aging and deadly melanoma development. But both UVA and UVB can lead to skin aging and skin cancer. So, it stands to reason that if you're going to be out in the sun for longer than it depends on you, 30 minutes, maybe more, maybe less, or during the middle of the day when the UV rays are much stronger, that you can protect yourself from all of that bad stuff by putting on some sunscreen. And the higher the SPF, the more you're protected, right? Not quite. You already know that the SPF rating is the comparison of the time it would take to burn with or without the sunscreen. So 10 minutes of unprotected sun exposure would be equal to 150 minutes of sun exposure while wearing SPF 15 sunblock. But the actual protection in the real world doesn't usually, or ever, match up with that sunscreen SPF rating. I didn't know this before, but SPF rating is calculated in a pretty imprecise way by using real, pale-skinned human subjects. Maybe Jim Gaffigan should look into this as a potential vocation for his 5 children. Have you heard his jokes about raising vampires and having to put sunscreen on his kids? Oh, we're going to the beach next week? All right, better start putting sunscreen on them now. It's so true. It takes forever, especially when you're putting it on kids too. The SPF rating is also imprecise because people don't put sunscreen on as thickly as the test subjects, and they don't reapply it every hour like the instructions say. Another problem is that most people think SPF 50 is twice as effective as SPF 25, and SPF 100 is twice as effective as SPF 50. Not so. The difference once you get above SPF 30 is negligible, like from 98 to 98.5% protection. Australian authorities cap SPF values allowed to be printed on labels at 30. Europeans, Japanese, and Canadians cap it at 50. Here in the US, they can still market SPF 100 sunscreens, even though it's meaningless and silly. Hey there! I wanted to quickly interrupt and let you know that it's so much less of a struggle to consistently dominate your health choices when the thoughts you think naturally nudge you toward what you're trying to achieve. If you're looking to more consistently rock your healthy behaviors, I have a completely free 18-minute mini course for smart women like you who know that sometimes a quick mind flip can go a long way. Click the link in the show notes or go to healthcourage.ck/page/mini for this free mini course on 6 thoughts people who consistently rock their health choices think, and start putting one of them to good use inside your head today. Another big problem is that SPF doesn't tell you what spectrum of UV rays are being blocked, so it's not even a good indication of how much it protects you from the most harmful UV rays. The SPF value reflects only how well a product protects from UVB rays. SPF doesn't reflect a product's ability to protect from UVA rays. This is a big deal. You can be all gooped up and still be getting full doses of the type of UV rays that lead to aging, immune system suppression, and melanoma. That's bad news. And it's, unfortunately, really hard to tell what kind of coverage sunscreen products are going to give you. We want full spectrum coverage, but just because the label says full spectrum or broad spectrum doesn't mean it really is. So lame. In Europe, it's a law that the sunscreen's UVA protection must be at least 1/3 of its UVB protection. Not so in the US. It can be UVB only and claim to be a ridiculously high SPF value. Another issue with sunscreens, especially the high SPF ones, is that they have high concentrations of sun-filtering chemicals. Our skin is our biggest organ, and a lot of things we put on our skin get absorbed into our body and react with our physiology. Many chemical sunscreens are known to cause tissue damage and hormone disruption. Excuse me for a moment, I need to slather on this product that causes tissue damage so that I don't get tissue damage from the sun. Wait a minute! You probably heard the kind of big news that as of January 1st, 2021, Hawaii state law prohibits the sale and distribution of sunscreens that contain oxybenzone and octinoxate. I was really surprised when I heard that, but I like it. Good for you, Hawaii. It's the first place in the world to ban chemical sunscreens, and the reason why they did it is because those two chemicals are definitively proven to cause genetic damage to marine life. All that sunscreen washing off all those swimming bodies damages sea life, especially juvenile coral, causing bleaching, deformities, DNA damage, and death of coral. If the coral dies, so do the anemones, fish, clams, seahorses, and so on. There's a new bill proposing the ban of avobenzone and octocrylene. If it's passed, those two chemical sunscreens will be added to the naughty list in January of 2023. Since Hawaii's bold move, Aruba, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Marshall Islands, and Key West have all passed their own sunscreen bans. Yay for saving coral and starfish and urchins and all the other little underwater creatures. But if those chemical sunscreens are causing deformities and DNA damage in sea life, can they really be that good for those of us walking around on those, what do you call them? Oh, feet. Strolling along down that, what's the word again? Street. Up where they walk, up where they run, up where they stay all day in the sun with chemicals all over their bodies. But seriously, do we know enough about the effects of these chemicals on humans? Not really. Sunscreens are considered over-the-counter drugs, so are overseen by the FDA. There are 17 FDA-approved sunscreens, but only 8 of them are commonly used. I don't want to make you all fall asleep at the wheel while I just read through a tedious list of them with all of their accompanying catalog of facts. But I do think it's worth briefly mentioning a few things so that you have the power, in the form of knowledge, to protect yourself and your family. We'll start with the coral killers: oxybenzone, octinoxate, avobenzone, and octocrylene. Oxybenzone and avobenzone are pretty common, like in tons of sunscreens. They're really the most used ones. Oxybenzone has the most damning evidence. It is very well absorbed through the skin. The CDC says it is present in pretty much every American body. And it is a hormone disruptor, acting as a weak estrogen and can lower testosterone. This may be a greater danger to children and adolescents than to adults. There are all kinds of studies showing problems with adolescent boys and babies born to moms who use oxybenzone. It likely increases rates of endometriosis, breast cancer, uterine hyperplasia, and thyroid tumors. No bueno. Plus it kills the coral. The other Hawaiian outlaw is octinoxate. It is also readily absorbed into the skin and has been found in human blood at 16 times the FDA safety threshold after normal sunscreen application. It also disrupts hormones like thyroid, testosterone, and progesterone. It's also basically no bueno for humans and mermaids. Avobenzone is one of the proposed sunscreens to ban in Hawaii. It's very common in sunscreens. You see it all the time. It actually protects from UVA rays, so it's usually what is added to make a sunscreen broad spectrum. Avobenzone can disrupt the endocrine system too, including blocking the effects of testosterone. It's not great, but not as terrible as oxybenzone and octinoxate, and it does protect from UVA, so there's a chance that the benefits could outweigh the risk. The other chemical proposed for ban in Hawaii is octocrylene. It's readily absorbed at levels up to 14 times the FDA safety threshold, but nobody really knows what is actually safe. The main problem, besides that it's a coral killer, it's frequently contaminated with benzophenone, which is a proven carcinogen. It probably has some hormone disrupting properties, but it isn't proven to be as bad as the other guys, unless you have an allergic reaction to it, which lots of people do, including, I think, my oldest son. At least that's my best guess. He gets a crazy rash from certain stick-type sunscreens that have that in it. You're not falling asleep yet, are you? A couple of quick unknown risk products. Homosalate is commonly used in US sunscreens. Its safety is unclear, but it does seem to penetrate skin and disrupt hormones and also produce toxic byproducts as it breaks down. Sounds fabulous. The European Commission recommends a maximum concentration in sunscreens of 1.4% for human safety. The FDA allows sunscreen products to contain up to 15%, more than 10 times what the Europeans allow. Lastly, octisalate is a sunscreen that also readily absorbs through the skin at levels up to 10 times the safety threshold, but the safety is unknown. It does bind to estrogen receptors, but it's unclear what effects this has on health. Whew! You made it through 6 of the 8. You probably know the last 2, titanium dioxide and zinc oxide. These are the good guys. You know that zinc oxide used to be what dorky characters in 80s sitcoms would put on their nose, and it would be white, like diaper cream on your nose, because diaper rash cream is usually zinc oxide. This could be a life hack. How to save money on sunscreen. New nanoparticle technology has made it so there can be clear, or should we say clearer, less white zinc oxide and titanium dioxide sunscreens. They still give you a little bit of that essence of ghost look. So what's so great about them? Mostly that they don't get absorbed into your body. They don't get in there and start binding to your hormone receptors like the other 6 ingredients do. They just sit on top of your skin and prevent UV rays from getting to your skin to cause damage. And they don't kill coral. Titanium dioxide blocks UVB and shortwave UVA, but not longwave UVA rays. Zinc oxide protects against both UVA and UVB. It's the only broad-spectrum single-ingredient sunscreen. You'd be totally fine with using just zinc oxide. Holy cow, it's way windy outside my window. Sorry, hopefully you can't hear that. One problem to be very aware of is that titanium dioxide is classified as a possible human carcinogen if it is inhaled. So powdered and spray formulations of titanium dioxide should be avoided. There's a possibility that manufacturers could coat these minerals in bad photosensitive chemicals, which would negate the safety of the product. So you have to be confident in the manufacturer. There's one more ingredient that's rarely found in US sunscreens called Mexoryl SX, which is a UVA blocker. There's insufficient data about it, but no evidence has shown that it's harmful. Something else to keep in mind is that 50 to 70% of the sunscreen you put on will be inactive ingredients. So those should be considered too as something that could get absorbed into your skin and start causing problems, just like with any cream, lotion, potion, cosmetic, etc. So, what's the least dangerous and most effective sunscreen you can use? What should probably be your first line of defense against skin cancer and premature aging? Here's a hint. It's what your great-grandma used. It has an extremely long safety and effectiveness record. It's called clothes and shade. I think we sometimes forget that sunscreen isn't our only tool to prevent getting burned. When you consider physiologic risk to benefit ratio, parasols and lace gloves are where it's at. I would personally love to see you walking down the street with a parasol, but it might be a little inconvenient if you don't have a footman readily available to hand it off to you when you're done with it. I'd also be down with seeing you walking around in a pioneer bonnet. Those are cute. And when people asked you about it, you could tell them all about oxybenzone and octinoxate. Sounds like a win-win to me. There are some interesting theories about why we've become so fragile and started developing alarmingly high skin cancer rates after thousands of years of living with the sun in the sky every day. We already talked about polyphenols, and I do think that plays a role. I know people say that if you have enough astaxanthin and some other antioxidants that you can take orally as supplements, you're less likely to burn. Another one that makes some sense to me is that our skin is composed of a lot of lipids or fats. Throughout evolutionary history, humans have been eating natural fats from grass-fed animals, fish, nuts, seeds, olives, avocados, etc. Then suddenly, we start eating huge amounts of unnatural vegetable oils instead of the essential fatty acids in the proper ratio that we're designed to use in our bodies. We know these vegetable oils, which are in everything and are still oftentimes touted as healthy, are inflammatory and damage our bodies and brains. So it doesn't seem like a far stretch to me to believe that perhaps manufacturing our skin with subpar ingredients like canola oil leads to skin that doesn't have the natural defense potential of skin made of healthy fats. Another super interesting theory that I happened to stumble across is that bacteria on healthy skin, Staphylococcus epidermidis, produces a chemical called 6N-hydroxyamine purine, and that 6NHP is a sunscreen. What? Researchers have studied it a lot in animals, and it is an effective sunscreen. It is effective UV protection for animals. They have put Staphylococcus epidermidis on. A study of 18 humans showed that 16 of them had some Staphylococcus epidermidis as part of their skin microbiome. 2 of them had none. Of the 16, some had more of it than others. It's also possible that some of the staphylococci make more 6NHP than others. Makes me wonder if my hands have been less protected from the sun for the past 2 years as I've been sanitizing them so much since the start of the pandemic. There's a lot to figure out, but it's kind of weird, and it's just more evidence that our life and our health really do depend on what kind of a host we are to our holobiome. We know it influences our weight, our mood, our ability to absorb nutrients, our total body inflammation level, blood sugar control, cravings, dental health, hair health, and now protection from UV damage. Crazy stuff. I'd love to put on a probiotic cream in the future instead of oxybenzone or avobenzone, and I assume the coral around the world would prefer that too, so I hope they figure it out. The Environmental Working Group, or EWG, has a comprehensive list of sunscreens and scores them based on their safety and effectiveness. I'll put a link in the show notes to their sunscreen guide, which is long but useful. You can look up the brand you have on hand or the one you're considering buying for guidance. It can be really helpful. You can click on the top-rated sunscreens, there are 13 pages of them, and hopefully find something that you like that won't stay in your bloodstream for weeks and disrupt your hormones. Some of the ones I've chosen for myself and recommended to people at the pharmacy are only rated a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the best and 10 being horrible, so I was a little surprised by that. In a quick glance, I didn't see any spray sunscreens on the nice list. Remember that aerosolizing and breathing in these chemicals in addition to absorbing them through your skin is not good. I know they're convenient. I have kids, I get it, but it's really not worth the risk. Remember that the whole reason we want to protect our skin from UV radiation is to prevent squamous cell, basal cell, and melanoma cancers and premature aging. The FDA allows most sunscreens to claim that they prevent skin cancer, but it simultaneously reports that the evidence to support this statement is contradictory. The available evidence suggests that sunscreen use prevents squamous cell carcinoma, but there is not strong evidence that it prevents basal cell carcinoma, and there are lots of questions as to whether or not it prevents melanoma. Melanoma cases have been rising drastically since 1978, but there isn't clear data about why. It's definitely not a simple correlation with lifetime sun exposure. Some studies correlate regular sun exposure with decreasing melanoma risk. It's 2022. You'd think we'd have more of this figured out by now. It's the sun, for crying out loud. But we just don't. What all the evidence does seem to point to is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Telling everyone to wear high SPF sunscreen all the time, even when you think you're only going to be indoors, is not the answer. That was the prevailing advice for a long time. Becoming vampires who religiously avoid the sun is bad for our mood and our circadian rhythm. We know this because vampires are ill-mannered and nocturnal. Everyone is different, and what is best for you depends on your individual biochemistry and skin type. Do more of what works for you and less of what doesn't. Most people need some limited sun exposure regularly to get enough vitamin D. Regular sun exposure may possibly decrease your risk of melanoma. Skin type matters here too. It takes 6 times more skin exposure time to the sun to get the same amount of vitamin D in a person with very dark skin than in someone with very light skin. Don't forget that UV rays are weaker during the morning and evening hours and during the winter. Once your vitamin D requirements are met, you'd be wise to protect yourself from UV damage. Now you know how to find a less toxic sunscreen, which is important, but don't forget that sunscreen isn't your only tool to prevent sun damage, or that sunscreen has limitations. Clothing, hats, shade, sunglasses, strategic timing of your outdoor activities, and checkups at the dermatologist can all be part of your strategy to decrease your chance of getting skin cancer or premature skin aging. I hope you've gotten some ideas of how to optimize your sun exposure strategy this summer, or at least feel a little more confident in your understanding of the different ingredients and what makes them, quote, bad. Oftentimes the benefit outweighs the risk of using them, but sometimes the risk can be avoided. Next week, we're going to talk about something scary, uncertainty. Until then, save the coral and don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.
Finding someone that understands you is hard because you're human, and there's a lot of different humans out there. eHarmony helps you find someone you can be yourself with. You think no one would understand mourning a plant like it's a loved one, or singing made-up songs to your dog, but that's the type of person eHarmony helps you find. Someone who makes you feel seen, heard, and understood. Get started today on eHarmony. Get who gets you.